Brian Kramer is the general manager of Toyota of Naples, one part of the Germain group, and he is a very, 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 very well-loved person on LinkedIn. Let me just say, when Brian posts something on LinkedIn, he gets hundreds of responses. And at first, when I saw him, I was like, wow, who is this guy? Because he posted an article about Pixar and Pixar's unwillingness to, or Disney's unwillingness to recognize Pixar as a viable way to continue animation, because the old thinking in Disney is that animation was hand-drawn, frame by frame. It was the art, it was the craft. Nothing, no technology could take this place. There were a lot of artists that would be very defensive about it. And what happened was Pixar went out and, as we all know, started their own company. And Disney ended up buying them back for how much? Like $7 billion. That was a $7 billion snub that they gave them. So that was the first way I came across your content. And then since then, we've talked, we've had lots of conversations, interviews, and Brian is somebody who, in my opinion, is one of the most dialed in has one of the most dialed in mentalities when it comes to the customer experience. A lot of other things too, but I thought you could bring a lot of value with customer experience because it's evident from your LinkedIn following that you're very good at connecting with people and their emotions and what they're feeling and what they're thinking, which translates really well to delivering a great customer experience, because people are coming to the industry or coming to buy a car in all different states of mind, in all different emotional states, and when you can accommodate that, well, you get the result that you get. So Brian, thank you for making the trip. Brian flew all the way out here this morning. He's going to speak, he's going to have something to eat, and he's going to fly home. So welcome, please, Brian Kramer.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Appreciate it, you inviting me up here. I'm a little out of my league with all the people on this docket, but I appreciate it.
Me too. That makes two of us. Why don't you have a seat, please?
Cool.
All right, so I don't want to belabor it because we're talking about customer experience. You've done some amazing things in your store, so I want to start off with your overall perspective. What's your mindset when you even approach, how do we deliver the best customer experience? How do you process through that?
I think it starts with our associates' perception, massive amounts of clarity. I'm also a big fan of clarity. And making sure that there's nothing left to be interpreted. Everything's completely clear what to do, when to do it, and empowering your people a lot.
Well, I want to take it back a second.
Please.
I'm talking about you personally. How do you start to think of like, all right, I need to deliver a great customer experience? Aside from not like tactically, like how you're going to line it up, but what do you think people want?
I think at the end of the day, they want to be treated no differently than if you called me and you wanted to buy a vehicle from me. They want to be treated like that.
Yep.
And they want to be guided through the system like they're a friend or a family of somebody. And they don't want to go through all the BS. They want the same, they want the same experience that if it's the dealer's friend, yep, that they're going to get, and we should just give that to everybody.
And so when you approach any customer experience situation, you go in knowing eventually, basically what result that you want. What is the result you want when a customer comes in? What do you want them to be able to say or feel once the transaction's over?
That they're welcome like a guest in your home, that they feel a connection to the brand. When they walk in, they feel familiar and they feel comfortable, and they're not spending a lot of time with administrative paperwork and all sorts of things like that. They're spending time on the experience, and we reduce as much of that redundancy for the associates and for the salespeople so that they can focus on that guest experience and the human interaction. Because I think that's what is causing all this margin compression, is we're making it so commoditized, and we're making it just a transaction instead of an experience. And when you do that, then your grosses will reflect that.
Do you think that we're talking today too about what has changed in the last 6-9 months, like the new expectations of the customer experience? Can you start by telling us some of the details about your store? Because I think that's relevant, right? Whenever a dealer sees another dealer, then we're like, why should I listen to you? So just give us a little summary of your store, and then we'll talk about this new experience.
So we've got a great store. We're a Toyota dealership in Naples, Florida, in Southeast Toyota Distributors, which is a portion of TM&A, but they're very aggressive. They have high expectations for sales, for customer satisfaction, and everything in between. And there's a lot of reasons that we could find ways to make excuses it's an older demographic in Naples. So when I said I want to be the most digital dealership in the country, they said, well, you know, there's a lot of other places that are probably a lot easier to do it than in Naples, Florida.
Right.
So when we went with an exclusively digital experience, I found out that the customers wanted it the whole time. It was just a matter of us catching up to them.
So you think that mentality, that defensive mentality, like a playing defense before you're playing offense, so it sounds like that was made on a presumption that the older demographic would not want the technology.
100%. No differently than seasonality, there's still a lot of people that live there year-round.
Yep.
But it's easy to justify any reason why not to do stuff, and it's taking people out of their comfort zone. It's also telling the associates, and I think the number one thing is you got to tell them it's okay to fail, not consistently not being accountable, but they can take risks and empower them to. It's not going to be perfect every single time. We're not trying to be perfect. We're just trying to get better than we were yesterday. And when they're comparing us to Amazon or they're comparing us to the Apple store, that's competition.
Yep.
It's not the Toyota store down the street or even the Nissan store down the street.
So how do you, thinking that mindset, right? Because it's easy to, I agree with that, first of all. But secondly, it's when I buy, a box of paper clips, or I buy some socks, or I buy an HDMI cable, it's so easy, and I expect it to be that easy. Do you think people expect buying a car to still be that easy?
No, they expect it to suck. And then if you don't suck,
Right.
then you exceed their expectations.
Just by not sucking.
Right.
So, but taking that into granted, they expect it to suck. How do you combat that right out of the gate?
So you have to start with the pricing strategy, because really at the end of the day, and I myself for 25 years was the culprit of it. I'm advertising $99 payments with $99 down, or let me rephrase that, $99 payments or $99 down. And then they would come in, that's not what we said, that's not what we meant, here's what it is, let me show you the fine print. And ultimately, we got talented enough people that we can maneuver out of that, but there's no need for it. So when you do that, you're putting your associates at a disadvantage, because then we wear them out because they're talking price when we're the ones that are advertising price, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and we blame them for it. And then when they come back up to the desk, why did you bring up the price? Yeah. I don't know, the customer did. When it was just in the commercial, or it's on the website, but we put it on the website,
right,
but
so
they're
you're
not
already,
allowed to say it.
You're seeding that, you were used to seed that relationship with distrust from the very beginning, knowing that you can negotiate or talk your way through it, right? That was the old way. Right, I can handle it, let's just get them in the door, and then I can manage the emotions and the stuff from there. But that doesn't work anymore.
It can. There's a lot of people, I'm sure, on this call that are adept at it.
Yep.
We were adept at it, and we could run that play. It's just because you can doesn't mean you should.
So why did you change?
First, for the associates, because I thought to myself, if we don't trust the associates, how are the customers going to trust them? And if they see us not trusting them, and then we're not empowering them to do basic things, then it demeans them, it gives them less of an authority, and they want to deal with a manager. And then the managers get hijacked, and they get tied up, and not doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is coaching, developing, leading people.
Yep.
They end up putting out fires all the time, reacting, and not growing the business. So really, at the end of the day, not only is it more profitable, less friction, it's just the right thing to do. But I think a lot of people don't do it because of the 1 or 2 months fear. Well, what happens if I go backwards for a second? Because nobody wants to change the engine of an airplane while it's up in the air.
I think
it's got to keep flying.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the biggest things that I hear all the time when it comes to like changing a marketing strategy or whatever. Like, anybody in any industry, especially dealers, understand the investment principles that have to do with business, right? You buy real estate, you spend money now, and it comes back to you. You build a building, you spend money now, it comes back to you. You hire someone, you train them, you spend money now, it comes back to you. But when it comes to leads, sales, customer experience, a change in process, all of a sudden that mentality that makes so much sense in every other area no longer applies. But it's really the difference between playing checkers and playing chess, in my opinion, because you're like, oh, I want to jump the piece. Look, I just jumped the piece. Again, that's like sales and leads and like numbers that month. But chess players, like in 3 moves from now, I'm going to win this game.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's exactly how they should look at it.
And so when you did it, When you made the change, did you make your change all at once?
No, I always say if you do it all at once, it's like trying to boil the ocean, and that's why most people tap out. And we probably bit off more than we should have at that time.
Yep.
You know, we signed up with Prodigy and started I said, if we're not going to toe dip it, we're going to cannonball it.
Yep.
So we're going to go all in, and we're going to use iPads from the beginning. And there was we still have all kinds of issues, you know.
So let's talk about your experience then. Why don't you tell us about what it is now and why you think it's working? And then we'll back into, for some of the dealers who haven't made some of these changes, and then maybe you can coach them through a little bit on what you would suggest to get to that point. Because it's easy to look at the person that's got it all done, and you're like, hey, like our transaction time is super low, CSIs are super high, right? Like, you should do it. But
it's not all done.
Right. Oh, good. It's never done.
When we're further from not being done, probably from being done.
Okay,
even
great.
though we've gotten all this stuff.
Well, tell us where you're going. Tell us where you are now, and then we'll talk about how you started. So where would you like it to be, ideally?
So ideally, to where the salespeople, the finance managers, the sales managers are only delighting customers. At the end of the day, we strip away all the administrative tasks, all the stuff that AI could handle, all the stuff that doesn't involve delighting a guest, you know, wrapping up a car deal, generating revenue, or retaining a customer. Because those are the only things that really matter at the end of the day.
Yep.
If you look at any other
It's
industry.
the only thing they remember.
Right.
Yep.
So if we're not doing that, we're pushing them further ahead or towards a transaction, which is less profitable. And for us, we're getting held to a higher standard by the customers because we are advertising simple, fast, easy. So the second that it's not simple, fast, or easy, we get called out on it on social media.
You've set it in motion. You're like, here's our bar. If we don't hit it, we're going to hear about it because we want to hear about it.
And we're okay with it because I'm not going to wear the sales managers out or the salespeople out about something I created and put on them that they didn't necessarily ask for, because that's not right either. But we're going to take risks. Now, if it's the same problem repeating itself over and over again, that's a different conversation. But we hire great people, we recruit great people, we onboard them, and really, if we give them enough clarity, they do what they're supposed to do. 9.9 out of 10 times, it's mostly us not providing enough clarity as to why the things break down. But there's also uncharted territory with, the pain points that you have to go through. Sight unseen appraisals, virtual appraisals. How do you handle a customer that wants to do the paperwork remotely? How do you transition after you get the paperwork down, systemized, to completely digital virtual paperwork? And then the accounting department's friction with that, when they say, why is this happening? Why is this change necessary? And everybody looks at it as fear of loss, that you're trying to eliminate their jobs. But all we're trying to do is free them up so they can delight more customers and grow the business.
No, we hear that a lot, especially those types of, think of positions being eliminated. But it's the same. It's one of the things why you wrote that article about Pixar and Disney. Because the Disney animators were afraid they were going to lose their jobs, when realistically, Pixar was about to give them a dream toolkit to do what they always wanted to do with animation, but they didn't see it that way.
And they pushed back, just like Disney Parks employees pushed back when they were trying to go with those automated self-check-in kiosks, right, for fast passes. And they look back and they even sabotaged it. They tried to find holes in it, which has been done with us. The driver's license scans don't work. The systems aren't integrated. The customers don't like to give us their email address. They don't like it when we text them. And all those things that we've worked our way through, now it's just the way. And that initial pain, which was extremely painful, is now everybody who comes on board doesn't know any different way. And you'll see the new hires get up to 15, 18 cars a month within 45 days.
That's unheard of.
Yeah, our average salesperson last month sold 15.8 units per salesperson.
And I think that's the number that any dealer watching or listening to this would be like, that would be nice. Especially within 45 days from hire to that.
Michael Lukey from NADA said that number to me maybe in May when all this stuff was going on. And I told him that was a pipe dream. I said that might work in and I'm doing it myself.
So why did he tell you that number? Tell me, why did that number come up?
So he had, I want to say it was Mr. Reichert's store that he was talking about with Auto Fire Roadster and all the throughput that was going through. And they were talking about stripping away and enabling the associates to do more, and they were empowered to provide more information, and they didn't have to keep going back and forth. And I said, well, that's great in theory. You know, it's just natural to think that way.
That's right.
But then last month, the staff did it. We didn't realize it until the end. But 30-something salespeople, they sold 530-something cars. And
and that was in March, you said. You heard it in March, you were like, there's no way.
In May.
Oh, in May. In May.
Yeah, so in March, I
6
definitely
months.
wouldn't
Yeah.
have. I didn't believe it in May.
Right, and 6 months later, here you are.
Right.
What was the most painful change you had to make to get there?
There was a couple. So initially, before we went paperless, we were printing paperwork. And I couldn't figure out why certain things weren't happening. So I said, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to stop printing out of the computers, and we're just going to print from the iPads. So everything I was being told obviously wasn't accurate because freaking out and the sky was falling. And it took about 2 days, and we never looked back. The second thing was we were e-contracting. I wanted to be at 100% e-contracting. So I said, are we ready? We're ready. Yeah, because nobody wants to say that they're not. So
Right.
I deleted all the impact printer forms out of the DMS. So there was no other way. It's kind of like you're not going to start paying you tonight in Moneyball.
You landed on the island and you burn all the boats. You're like, we're never going back.
Right.
So did people like log in? How did they find that out? Like you deleted all the contracts, so they logged in just as a backstop. They're like, hey, where did these go?
Yeah, they thought there was a technical difficulty.
Asking for a friend, right?
Right.
Right. Asking
That's
for a friend.
kind of how it was.
And so that was a real painful part, but that forced progress.
And that initial pain with the customer that day, they said, I thought we're all about the customer.
Yep.
But we're not doing that. And sometimes you got to break a couple eggs to make an omelet. You know, it's not like we're going to do that forever, but there's got to be non-negotiables, and they've got to know where you're going to stand the line.
Yep.
And if you want to truly be frictionless, you've got to make those tough decisions. And we had a couple people leave in both situations,
of course,
that have since asked to come back. But they just didn't see it, or maybe I didn't provide enough clarity. I don't know which one, but and either way, it's not easy. It's painful, and when everything's working, the thing that I always hear is, well, why do we need to do this just for the, it's not like everything's broken. And it's not, but you got to resist the urge to be okay being okay.
That's right. That's right. No, you have to be willing to disrupt yourself.
Yes.
Right? And it sounds to me like case in point. You're like, there's a lot that's working. Like, we're making money, right? But that's the nature of disruption. It rarely comes from within because people are comfortable and people don't like to change. It's human nature.
And they're attached to their heritage. They're attached to the legacy. And a lot of them had a part of building the old way. Mm-hmm. So tearing that down.
Yep.
And I keep tearing down my old ways because I look at it, if Netflix or Amazon or somebody like that bought our dealership, would they do it that way?
Yep.
And the answer is absolutely not. If
Right.
Apple or they would say that's the most insane thing in the world. We still have a lot way to go, but really it's not even about the technology. It's about culture and process and people and minimum expectations, and that's the hardest part. We still deal with it today. And
that's right.
My team's crazy adaptive and they're innovative, and they come up with all kinds of solutions. We're doing decentralized appraisals and letting the salespeople appraise cars.
When did that start?
This week.
How's it going? So they're doing that right now, and you're here.
Yeah.
And there's probably a fire getting started by somebody.
Yeah, and it's okay if there is.
Yeah.
And they know it's okay, and it's not going to be perfect. And we're not trying to be perfect. We're just trying to be great.
Right.
And it's never going to be perfect. And if it gets to be perfect, then it's obsolete probably.
Something you just said reminded me of I always like to think in terms of examples because examples can kind of equalize the playing field in people's understanding. And last night I went to Chick-fil-A, right? There's Chick-fil-A about a mile away. And to my knowledge, Chick-fil-A doesn't have any incredible technology that McDonald's doesn't have. Actually, McDonald's probably has a lot more technology.
You're right.
They don't have anything different from a product offering standpoint that people have been doing this way longer at far larger scale don't have.
They've got the best clarity, the best training, and the best culture.
And bar none, when you go into a Chick-fil-A, you get a different experience with fast food.
Yes.
And you feel better about it. And I always joke Chick-fil-A is one of the only fast food places I'll eat because I feel like I'm doing good by eating there. Right? I've convinced myself that the waffle fries are actually me doing good for the world. But that's, I think, case in point. Chick-fil-A, it's not the technology. You said that. I haven't heard. Usually when people say we have to change, we have to streamline things, it has to do around a technology solution. And this one widget is going to solve all your problems, but every widget seller knows that the widget alone will not do it.
No, if you don't start with the culture and start in the mirror, you know, because I still violate a lot of stuff today, but it's okay in our dealership to talk about failing, and it's okay to say that you don't know, and it's okay to ask questions, because if you don't have that culture, then everybody just wants to have this mentality where, you know, they just want to tell you what you want to hear. You never get to the root problem.
Yep.
It never gets fixed because it's not okay.
Right.
And I question everything, but now they question everything. And
with the intention, they question everything because you know the intention isn't to bury somebody else. The intention is to actually so we can all have a better ship to sail on.
And it's got to be that level of trust, because if we don't trust the sales managers, they don't trust the salespeople. So when the salespeople come up and they say, hey, this guy saw this price online or on the ad, well, let's give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe they're telling the truth.
Right.
And they're not going to do it every time, just like with these appraisals.
Right.
There's the thought crossed my mind, well, what if they all don't get accurate condition?
Right, exactly.
But my managers miss stuff too, and I miss stuff too. I mean, the worst thing they could do is have me appraise it. A salesperson appraising it is better than me.
That's right.
But as they're going in and they're in a rush, they're going to probably take more time and be more detailed, just like they do we let our salespeople pull payoffs through Route 1. And I used to have about $3,000 a month in chargebacks, so let's say $36,000, $40,000 a year. And then I finally empowered them, and I said, I'm going to trust you. And they didn't violate it, and I saved $40,000 a year.
Unbelievable.
Off that one thing.
I hope, say that again, because I think it's important, because we hear the rhetoric of like, hey, you need to trust people, you need to do right, you need to give them that, and then it'll come back to you. But this is a real story and a real example. Can you tell that story one more time?
So normally, like when I sold cars, we had like a white pages and a Rolodex, but you'd have all the payoff, the lender information. So I was looking at it, was $3,000 a month, sometimes more, sometimes less. So why don't we just give them access to Route 1 to pull payoffs? Are you crazy? You can't give salespeople access to Route 1. I go, what's the worst that could happen? And they didn't break it. And it sped their experience up with the customer 15 minutes. So now you're squeezing the bubbles out of the brake lines, and it's 9 minutes here, it's 8 minutes there, it's every little thing. So I think we can save 30 minutes with this appraisal thing. We saved 15 to 30 minutes with that, but we were spending $3,000 a month on average, almost $40,000 a year. That was eliminated just by trusting our associates. And if you hire people right, you give them clear expectations, which is critical, and tell them what to do and when to do it. I find that they do. Most of the time they don't do something is because they didn't know how and they didn't feel comfortable asking because of a, aggressive mentality or the response they thought they were going to get. And the more that you empower them, the faster they go. They don't want to be slowed down with a bottleneck at the desk. And now I've got new salespeople that are calling for payoffs, and they said, I was on the phone the other day for 20 minutes. I'm like, well, that's the way it was like 2 years ago. Like it was some crazy thing because he couldn't pull it online and do it all automated. And I think that's how we're all going to look at the car business 2 years from now.
Yeah, I agree with that. So parting words to dealers that are watching this or are going to see it in the future, because we're going to cut this out and get it in front of as many dealers as we can. What is your advice to a dealer who is considering starting to make a change into this route, knowing that like, hey, you can't boil the ocean all at once? How are you going to speak to them eye to eye and tell them why they should?
I would say you have to start with your CSI surveys, because the customers are already telling you what they want fixed. It's just a matter of just embracing that productive discomfort and tackling them one at a time. For us, it was overall time spent in the dealership. So then we start breaking it down into quarter time, just like in service. So what's taking the most time? And then we narrow it down that it was in that situation, it was F&I.
Yeah.
So there was numerous things that we had to get out of. Then we had to go back to the time spent appraising the car, transparency on appraisals, which we're still dealing with,
Yep.
and being straightforward and honest, which in every dealership is not anywhere where it needs to be, and it's not where it is at any other industry, and we need to catch up.
So if somebody is on the precipice and they're like, I don't know if I should, what's your one sentence that you say to them? You should do this because?
It's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. Because if you're a leader, it's happening to you. It's not, or because of you, it's not happening to you. It's not COVID that's happening to you. It's not some external circumstance. It's happening because you're allowing it to happen. And I allowed it to happen for 2 decades. And I'm just not okay tolerating myself, tolerating mediocrity anymore.
That's good. Brian, I can't thank you enough for making the trip out here. Thanks for sharing your insights and your wisdom. And look, if
Thanks
you
for
don't
having
know,
me.
Brian is on LinkedIn like a boss. So follow Brian Kramer. His link is, if you're on the stream, you can just click on him. There's a lot of wisdom that comes out of his feed, and you should tap into that however you can. So Brian, thank you again for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I fist bump you.